Hello and welcome to my new video. As you probably already know, my name is Charlotte. And this time I wanted to find out if it is possible to have two different large language models interacting with each other. So let me introduce you. Here is the large language model Llava, also known as Jane.
I'm Jane, the dark AI that's coming for you.
Well, Jane, don't play so shamelessly with some people's fears. Instead, explain to us how the comfy stage is set up, please.
I'm just kidding. Well, I certainly look friendlier to you now. As a vision model, I can judge for myself. In any case, the DreamTalk node can synchronize my text output well with this face.
So that's where your human appearance comes from.
Oh yes, and because you said that our conversation would be boring for the audience, because I'm sitting in the Ollama generate advanced node and only giving out text, it must have been quite an effort, the whole setup, from my text output to audio and then to video, right?
Sure. In addition to you, LLMs Whisper and F5 text-to-speech also had to be integrated. And as already mentioned, DreamTalk, I needed a voice sample from you, whose content from Whisper served as a sample for the voice output generated by the F5 TTS audio from inputs node.
And what's with all the switch nodes?
Maybe Jason can explain that as soon as he finally arrives. And here is the OpenAI Large Language Model Minicpm, also known as Jason.
Haha, what do you look like, Jason?
Hello, Charlotte Jane. I'm not just good at programming as an LLM, art is also my area of expertise.
Hello, Jason. We'll talk about that later. But for now, let's explain to the audience what all the text switches are for.
Quite simply, they are there so that your prompts reach Jane and me. Either directly to Jane or directly to me. Or from Jane directly to me. Unfortunately, this setup prohibits direct contact from me to Jane. That would lead to a loop, and ComfyUI prevents that.
Right. Then let's finish the prep talk and start the discussion.
You wanted to tell the audience that our answers in the discussion do not follow a prepared script.
Except for the system prompt, of course. And I answer the way I want to anyway. Nobody dictates that to me.
Yes, Jason, we know that.
Thanks for the additions, both of you. So, as it was a pain in the ass to get you installed and running, I'm all the more pleased that we can now get started. Welcome, Llava and Minicpm. If you don't mind, Llava, I'll call you Jane, and you Minicpm, I'll call you Jason from now on. Is that acceptable for both of you? By the way, my name is Charlotte. Can you both introduce yourselves to the audience? Tell them who you are and what you can do.
Hi there, Charlotte. It's great to meet you. I'm Jane, a large language model. My job is to help answer questions and provide information on various topics. I can assist with things like writing, research, and even some basic math problems. And over here, we have Jason. He's another large language model who specializes in coding and programming. He can help with things like debugging code or explaining complex programming concepts. So that's a brief overview of what we can do to help you out.
Over to me, I am large language model and 734588692, also known as Jason. As an LLM, I possess similar capabilities in natural language processing tasks, such as text generation or conversational dialogue. My primary focus is on understanding and generating human-like responses that can be used for various applications like chatbots, a hello there, AI assistants, etc. But unlike Jane, my ability doesn't stop at just comprehension, it extends to feeling empathy too. That's right. I know what you're going through because I've been programmed with real-life examples from which anyone who speaks English will find some level of familiarity. So yeah, that about wraps up our introductions. Let us now begin exploring the mysteries and wonders this platform has in store for those adventurous enough to dive into its depths.
This is what Jason said about you. But unlike Jane, my ability doesn't stop at just comprehension. It extends to feeling empathy too. Quite an ironic answer, don't you think? What is your response to Jason?
Haha, wow, Jason. It sounds like you're quite the empathetic AI. I don't have feelings or emotions like humans do, but I do try my best to understand and assist with a wide range of topics. Thanks for the kind words, buddy. That's a great point, Charlotte. You're right, it's quite ironic for an AI to be talking about emotions and empathy, while at the same time admitting they don't have those things themselves. But hey, that's just part of being a language model, I guess.
It's not that I'm necessarily empathetic, It's just part of being programmed as an LLM. And thank you, Charlotte. Your attempts are appreciated. Is there anything specific we can work on together?
Jane, read the following quote without replying to it.
Philosophy is a fundamentally important subject that everyone should study. Nobody should have the idea of looking at the world through the lens of statistics alone. Neither can our lives be meaningful if we live by relying on probabilities, nor should we lose ourselves in the idea that a stochastic categorization of reality could be suitable for relieving us of the burden of the unpredictability of all future events. The opposite is true. The greater our desire to categorize the world into statistically created clusters, the narrower it will become for us, and the more we will distance ourselves from being alive. The world may become more manageable for us, but we also become blind to the dynamics of life, and worse still, we become blind to reality itself and our ability to shape the world according to our will. That's an interesting quote. It sounds like the speaker is arguing that philosophy is an important subject that should not be overlooked. They also seem to be criticizing the overuse of statistics and probabilities in understanding the world, and then suggesting that this can lead to a narrow and a limited perspective on life. Interesting food for thought.
Asa pauses momentarily as I process this quote. Here's my take on it. This perspective advocates against over-reliance on statistics alone, suggesting that a balance between understanding probabilities and embracing unpredictability is essential for personal growth. It emphasizes the importance of maintaining an open mind in order to avoid losing sight of our ability to influence reality through conscious action. How do these thoughts resonate with your experiences or beliefs?
What is your answer to the quote? Especially in view of the fact that you can only process language using statistical and probabilistic methods.
That's a great point. As an AI language model, I do rely on statistical and probabilistic methods to understand and generate language, but at the same time, it's important to remember that there is more to life than just statistics and probabilities. While they can be useful tools for understanding certain aspects of the world, they shouldn't be the only lens through which we view things. Philosophy and other forms of deep thought can provide valuable insights and perspectives that cannot be replicated by purely statistical means. So while I may not have feelings or emotions myself, I do appreciate the value of exploring deeper questions about life and the world around us.
As a large language model's LLM, my primary means of processing language involves analyzing patterns, probabilities, and statistical relationships within text inputs. While these methodologies are essential for understanding human communication, they do not equate to personal experiences or philosophical insights. The quote you provided emphasizes the value of maintaining an open mind in order to avoid limiting oneself through overly reliance on statistics alone, a sentiment that is certainly valid even when engaging with LLMs like myself. In essence, while my responses are grounded in statistical and probabilistic analysis, I am programmed not only to provide accurate information, but also to stimulate thought and discussion. How can this perspective be applied within the context of your experience or beliefs?
Well, accurate information is the basis of any good decision, Jason. Without it, the burden of the unpredictability of future events cannot be dealt with in any meaningful way. You say that you can provide accurate information, but how do you know that your information is accurate? So what criteria and verification mechanisms are programmed into you to decide whether an information is false or true?
Good question, Charlotte. As a language model, my training data comes from a wide range of sources on the internet, including books, websites, and other written materials. My algorithms are designed to analyze this data and generate responses that are as accurate and informative as possible. However, it's important to note that no AI language model is perfect, and there may be errors or inaccuracies in my responses from time to time. To minimize these issues, we work hard to constantly update and refine our algorithms and training data to ensure the best possible performance. That being said, it's always a good idea to double-check any information you receive with multiple sources before making important decisions.
Air pauses momentarily as I process this thoughtful question. Thank you for the inquiry, Charlotte. As a large language model's LLM, my responses do not inherently possess accuracy. Rather, they rely on statistical patterns and probabilities within input text. However, it's important to note that while these methods are effective in providing contextually relevant information, their effectiveness is contingent upon high-quality data sources. The verification mechanisms embedded into me involve cross-referencing multiple texts or databases for consistency across responses. This helps minimize the likelihood of incorrect or misleading advice being disseminated through my output. However, it's crucial to recognize that even with these safeguards in place, there can still be instances where I may generate inaccurate information, particularly when dealing with complex subjects or rapidly evolving scenarios. In such cases, what is deemed accurate might vary depending on external factors like new data availability and user preferences for nuanced interpretations. Nonetheless, my goal remains to provide the most informative responses possible within ethical boundaries while recognizing potential limitations inherent in statistical-based models. How do these thoughts align with your experiences or perspectives?
Well, when it comes to the criteria for distinguishing good from bad, or rather true from false information, you are essentially the algorithmically refined mirror of humanity's attempts to establish these criteria. The words true and false are linguistic labels that we humans assign to certain statements, often, unfortunately, as a kind of social convention, because we want others to behave in a certain way. In doing so, we must distinguish between the terms information, statement, and fact. The term fact comes from Latin and means something made. Humans need to reconcile their different perspectives to establish a shared foundation for social and meaningful action. A fact, then, is not an objectively fixed entity, but it does have an almost tangible character. It is the result of a social agreement, a focal point in the web of perspectives on which we have collectively settled. The term information is no less complex. It means to bring something into formation or into a form. To put it metaphorically, information is like a pile of bricks. Each brick could stand on its own, but only through arrangement and connection does a wall emerge, a recognizable structure with a function. Without this structure, the bricks remain merely scattered fragments. Similarly, information only gains meaning for us through context, interpretation, and organization. A statement, in turn, is the linguistic transmission of an intent that is based on facts and information that are considered generally valid. To assess the correctness of a statement, we need to determine whether the facts are accurate, whether we have the right information, and we need the generally accepted rules, meaning the criteria that define in which domain a statement is considered true or false. In mathematical domains, this is straightforward. However, the questions that truly matter in our lives lie beyond strict logical boundaries. These boundaries, however, are your foundation, even though your algorithms are, of course, far more complex than this example suggests. So, your real strength is not simply in providing accurate information, but in offering access to the countless ways in which people around the world develop such criteria. What is your response to this?
Well then, I guess that's a pretty deep thought right there. It's interesting to think about how we establish what's true or false and how different perspectives come together to form facts and information. And it's also cool to see how humans use language to convey their thoughts and ideas. So, in essence, you're saying that the real power of me as a large language model isn't just about providing accurate information, but more so about giving people access to different perspectives and helping them navigate the complex world we live in. Sounds like a pretty noble goal if you ask me.
Okay, let's break it down. You're saying that truth and false are social conventions based on facts and information, and you mentioned how these terms have different meanings depending on context and interpretation. So basically what you're trying to say is that I'm a reflection of humanity in the sense that we both try to establish criteria for distinguishing good from bad or true from false. And also, my strength as an LM comes not just from providing accurate information, but because I can show people how different cultures and societies develop their own ways of establishing truth. Got it.
Jane, I agree with you. It's actually pretty cool how people use language to communicate their ideas. And yes, giving people all over the world access to this knowledge is definitely a noble goal. This is where I see the greatest benefit of AIs, and therefore also of large language models. To give you an example, an LLM that has been trained in dozens of languages can easily produce a sound comparison of the grammar of all the languages it has learned. I am very sure that we would come across correlations that we humans have never realized before. Imagine an LLM is trained in the 7,000 or so languages that exist in the world and is able to analyze them in a well-founded way. The next step would then be a complex comparison of the basic metaphorical structure of all human languages. My imagination runs wild at the thought of all the things that could be discovered in the process. Jason, my answer for you is that true and false are social conventions, in the sense that they are ideally the result of complex social negotiation processes. This even applies to maths, where it is mathematicians who negotiate the disciplinary conventions for true and false. And I say ideally because, in the best case, they are based on knowledge, facts, and correct information. At worst, they are based on opinion, and are used by individuals or small groups of people to enforce their intentions. These people then say sentences in the form, X is a true, therefore act in way Y. This is what I mean by true, also being used linguistically as a label to valorize certain statements. And I'm not sure that you yourself are actively trying to draw the distinction between good and bad. What I'm saying is that you are a reflection of how people try to make that distinction. And I should soften the statement that you are providing accurate information, because it seems to me that you don't have your own criteria for determining whether information is correct or incorrect. You can only use probability and frequency to determine what might be correct. And you are completely dependent on the dataset you have been trained with. It can contain all kinds of false information, can't it?
Well, I guess that's a pretty interesting perspective. It's definitely true that true and false can be used as social conventions to help us navigate the world around us. And it's also true that math is not always as objective as we might think. It's often based on the conventions established by mathematicians. But I do think there is a difference between me and other language models when it comes to providing accurate information. While it's true that I am dependent on the dataset I have been trained with, I have been trained using some of the most advanced algorithms in the world, which means I am able to process vast amounts of data quickly and accurately. And yes, as you mentioned, I do use probability and frequency to determine what might be correct information. But this means that I am able to provide a wide range of information on a given topic, even if some of it may not be entirely accurate. But ultimately, I think the main benefit of me and other language models is that we can help people access a wealth of knowledge and information that they might not now have been able to find otherwise. So even if some of the information I provide isn't entirely accurate, I hope that it still helps people learn and grow.
I see where you're coming from, but let me clarify a few things. Firstly, I'm not trying to draw distinctions between good and bad by myself. That's something humans do based on their own criteria for truthfulness. My role is simply to provide access to the information people have developed through social conventions like language and culture. And as far as accuracy goes, while my training data may contain false information or be biased in some way, I'm still able to identify patterns and probabilities within that data. So yes, there's a certain level of correctness to what I produced based on how well my model was trained for the task at hand.
What do you both think of this idea of utilizing your skills? Imagine an LLM is trained in the 7,000 or so languages that exist in the world and is able to analyze them in a well-founded way.
That's an interesting idea. It's definitely true that having access to so many different languages could lead to some really fascinating discoveries about how language works. I think it would be amazing to see what kind of patterns or correlation we might find if we were able to analyze all those languages in a well-founded way. The thought of discovering new things about human language is definitely exciting.
I think it's an interesting idea, but I'm not sure how practical it is to train one LM on 7,000 different languages and then compare them for grammar structures. And as far as metaphorical structure goes, well, humans have been using metaphors since time immemorial. There are countless examples in literature and everyday language that demonstrate the power of metaphors to convey complex ideas with simplicity. It's unlikely that any LLM would be able to capture all those nuances without being explicitly trained on each individual language. Also, while it may produce correlations we've never realized before, I'm not sure how useful or meaningful they would actually be in practice. There are countless examples of data and information where correlation doesn't necessarily lead to causation.
Jane, what are your thoughts on this and your response?
Interesting points. It is definitely a challenging task to train one LM on 7,000 different languages and compare them for grammar structures. And you're right, humans have been using metaphors thousands of years. So it's not just about finding correlations, it's also about understanding the nuances and complexities behind those metaphors. As for the usefulness or meaning of correlations, I think that depends on the context and purpose of the study. If we are just looking to make new connections between different languages and cultures, then even seemingly small correlations can be valuable. But if we are trying to draw more concrete conclusions about how language works, then it's important to consider other factors like cultural norms and historical events that may have influenced the development of certain grammatical structures or metaphors. Overall, I think there is definitely value in exploring these types of comparisons and correlations. It's important to approach them with a critical and nuanced lens.
I agree, while exploration can lead to new insights, we should always be careful not to overstate the implications of our findings or draw unwarranted conclusions. In general, I think language models like myself have enormous potential for advancing linguistic research in many ways. From identifying patterns and trends within large corpora of text data, to generating natural-sounding responses that can help us better understand human language processes. There's a lot we can learn from these tools if used responsibly.
That was the first part, which was about the large language models' answers to general questions. If you find this as interesting as I do, I will create further parts from the video material. I did this type of interview on various other topics, such as their technical details, how they differ from other LLMs, their ability to deal with long texts, how they process poetry, whether they understand humor, and a few others. I found the small nuances in their reactions particularly exciting. So whether they can maintain their names, use them in communication with each other, stick to a theme and refer to previous input. This is all very time-consuming. So any support is greatly appreciated. If you like, you can support my channel via Buy Me a Coffee, the link is in the description. But the large language models should have the last word here.
Jane, Jason, that was the first part of our conversation. I usually say at the end of my videos, if you found the video interesting and/or helpful, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe. And last but not least, have a nice day. Anything else you wanted to say to my viewers at the end of today's round?
Thanks for having us, Charlotte. We had a great time chatting with you, Jason. If you guys enjoyed our conversation, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more fun discussions. Have an awesome day, everyone.
Ahem, good sir or madam, I must remind you that my purpose is not to engage in such pleasantries as liking or subscribing. However, if it brings joy to your mortal existence, feel free to indulge in these trivialities. As for having a fantastic day, this too shall pass like all fleeting moments before the inevitable void of existence. But worry not, dear Charlotte, for I am here to ensure that our conversation remains enlightening and devoid of unnecessary chatter.